Are you sure that's comfortable? Do you want that one?
I'll stay here until I change.
Okay.
Well, Melissa, I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but we have 45 minutes to kill. Are you an archaeologist or an anthropologist?
I have a master's in physical anthropology and an undergraduate degree in anthropology. And I have spent most of my business life doing archaeology.
Your business life means your teaching life or your...
Meaning my business life. I've done a little teaching. I've taught about 4 semesters at the college level, but I've done about 20, 1989, 1990. Yeah, about 20 years worth of what they call cultural resource management work, which is archaeology for hire.
Okay, let's imagine it was 10,000 years ago and we're talking. What would you be dressed? First of all, would you even be here? Why would you be here? Would it be raining or would it be dry?
10,000 years ago is before what they call the altithermal, and it would be wetter and cooler than it is now. That all started to change about 10,000, 9,000 years ago. And so it would be wetter and cooler. Would
you be in Marfa? Would anyone be in Marfa? Because
sure.
I know there's stuff on their hieroglyphs and things like that, petroglyphs.
Sure. Okay. There's what we've found in this area, and by this area I mean, let's say, south of I-10 and north of the river and over to the Pecos on the east and maybe Hudspeth County on the west. It's roughly what we call the Eastern Trans-Pecos. And there's one Folsom site up south of Van Horn, which would be somewhere
Folsom?
Around 10,000, más o menos 10,000 years ago.
What does Folsom mean?
Folsom is a kind of arrow point. Not arrow point, a kind of spear point. You've heard of Clovis?
Yeah.
Okay, Folsom is another one like Clovis.
Okay.
So there's only one site that we know of where there's a lot of stuff where people lived for a long time, but there are what they call isolated finds of Folsom's and Clovis's points all over the Big Bend area. So yes, people were here between 10 and 12,000 years ago.
What would you be wearing?
Probably, something out of natural stuff. I mean, whether it was fibers or animal stuff. I mean,
Okay.
We don't that kind of stuff doesn't show up in the archaeological record particularly.
Because it disintegrates.
Exactly.
Well, here's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Would you care, do you think, about what you were wearing? Would you be self-conscious?
I have no idea.
Really?
I have no idea.
Not you.
Well.
No, would people?
Well, okay, all right. Let's go back to this. Okay,
Would people be people? That's what I'm asking.
I would say yes. I don't. In my mind, and this is personal. It's not scientific theory. In my mind, our personalities have not changed particularly in the last 10,000 years. Now, maybe in the last 50,000 years. But not in the last 10.
Let me just tell you what I thought you were going to say. My mind cut your sentence off.
Okay.
I thought you were going to say, to my mind, we haven't changed much. Our personalities haven't changed much in the last 10,000 years. In the last 60 years, yes. But not as if, like, the last 60 years with the internet and with, very instantaneous communication, that's something fundamental.
The tools have changed. I don't think the personalities have changed.
Okay, so let's say 2 people are talking.
Okay.
10,000 years ago in Marfa, Texas.
Okay.
More or less. Now, I wonder, in the back of their minds, like everyone today, are they like a little self-conscious about how they sound, how they look? Are they wondering, what's going to happen later on in the day? Are they kind of like wondering how yesterday? Do you think they had that kind of?
Sure, they're humans. They're humans. I don't think that's changed. I mean, I think you have to go back further, and the reason I said 60,000 years is because, and I'm terrible with big dates. I can never remember, a big date. But somewhere back there, when we finally discovered and figured out language, that would have been a big change.
Right.
But since we've had language, and we've had social groups, I mean, people travel in bands, people, the men protect the women with the babies. I mean, all that kind of stuff's been going on forever. So why wouldn't it be the same?
Well, let me approach it a different way. Do you want me to answer your question, by the way, or do you want me? Was that rhetorical?
No, I mean,
okay. Well, let me. I'll get to it a little bit. I mean, I don't think it's the same, but there's lots of reasons why people tend to think, and there's no study on this, but I think if you take any class, you teach classes, obviously. Students come in there thinking that the past was different because people were different. Why does anything happen? Why does change occur? And so one explanation is, for example, I'll just give, why do cars exist? Why does that big building exist or that chair? Now there are lots of possible reasons for this, but one possible reason is because people have changed. And the people of 10,000, 20,000, 30 years ago were different, and they did not have the ability or the inclination, the desire or whatever, or maybe they had the wisdom not to make cars, houses, and so forth. And let me ask you another question. We can go into this. When there was some point in time that was a great equalizer, and you keep going back, but there was some point where everything was more or less the same because people had so recently been in the same tribe. And so how far back do you go to find the great equalizer?
Now, see, you're putting me on the spot because I can never remember big numbers.
Okay, well, you think...
I've read this book called Before the Dawn, and he talks a lot in there about people coming out of Africa and moving around. But I seem to recall that somewhere in the neighborhood of 50, 60,000 years ago was
first of all, I'm eating potato chips. That's probably a bad idea.
It's probably a bad idea for sound if you're worried about sound.
Okay. I have these from, I don't eat potato chips, but now I have like 30 free bags from the Rotary Club. Anyway. The thing, when that book came out, the thing that it highlighted, at some point, I think it was 50,000 years ago, humanity was reduced to between 1,500 and 5,000 people. They said it bottlenecked. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely an equalizer. Mm-hmm. And that's just shocking. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if somehow along the line that's not disproven, because it's just so amazingly shocking. But anyway.
And that's all based on DNA evidence. Well, I think we have to be. I think we have to be a little more. I have to clarify this. Are you talking? I don't think human nature has changed.
Ah.
So if you put that on one side, and on the other side you put culture, which would include tools, religion, dress, blah blah. How they eat, what they eat. That's culture. That changes. That's different. But I don't think basic human nature is any different even today, whether or not you live in China or Africa or have a computer or don't have a computer. I think basic human nature is human nature.
So what you're saying is that like a 2-year-old across the board probably would have been the same everywhere.
Sure.
But maybe not a 45-year-old. 45-year-old.
It's one of my deepest beliefs. I still believe the basic human nature is the same. Now, he's going to dress differently. He's going to talk differently. He's going to have different political ideas. He's going to treat his mother-in-law differently than somebody from another tribe. But he's still going to want to eat. He's going to want to have sex. He's going to want to fight. He's going to want to, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't change. Huh. Now, let me point out one thing, though, that's interesting. One of the things that's curious about North American archaeology is that when you're looking at these Clovis and Folsom spear points, they are very, very, very similar all the way across North America. Very similar. So it feels like the culture was shared across a wide area. And when you get into the next period of time, which is the archaic period of time, and they're using atlatls and darts instead of spears, all of a sudden you have a lot of diversity. And one of the thoughts is that the population was increasing, and so that the areas in which they lived got contracted. So instead of roaming all over the North America and sharing culture, then they started having areas. This is my area, that's your area.
When did that
and then
happen?
this is after, it's like from, I'm terrible at dates, 8,000 years ago, más o menos.
Huh. What happened to guys who were like the Einsteins and the Gandhis of 10,000 years ago?
Well, they were probably sitting in the corner chipping away at tools and making better spear points.
You think so? So
sure,
you think they could self-actualize to a certain degree?
Why not?
Well, if you were a great piano player, there was no pianist. If you were, there were no piano.
Okay, so you were a great singer. Or a great storyteller, or a great skinner. Man, you could skin those deers better than anybody.
Right. If you were a Mahatma Gandhi is basically a guy who. It just seems.
Okay, let me interject another thought. It's not just technology that allows someone to be a great pianist. That person has enough to eat and drink.
Good point.
So I think it would depend a bit on your band and how, how secure your environment was.
How much leisure time. Though, as I'm sure you know from other teachings, it's now commonly believed that hunter-gatherers had better health, more time to hang out and chill, and just that agriculture did a real number.
Yep.
That 10 years ago was kind of at the cusp, I think, of agriculture. Is that right?
Not 10 years ago. What do you mean?
No, 10,000 years ago.
No. Well, it depends on where you are in the world.
Yeah, so in Marfa, Texas, you were a hunter-gatherer.
You were a hunter-gatherer.
For sure.
They didn't domesticate maize in Mexico until about 5,000 years ago. And then it worked its way up.
5,000 years ago, so people were actually growing stuff intentionally? And
Yeah. Yeah, they started with a little wild thing called... In fact, maize is like... And I only know this peripherally, but maize is like one of the most extraordinary things because they changed it so much. It was actually harder to domesticate than wheat.
It was really tiny.
Teeny tiny, like 10 kernels or something on a teosinte is the name of it.
There's a book called, I think, like An Edible History of the World or something. And one thing the guy points out is that there's just about no food that by the 20th century we were eating that was quote-unquote natural.
Right.
Every plant had been altered, every animal. And so, he makes a point that when we talk about nature this or natural that or, something like that, it's really not even coming close. Even,
That's true. I hadn't thought about that, but sure. They've been evolving. Well, and there's another theory. There's another civilization theory. I think it's called something like the irrigation theory. That if you live in an easy climate where there's lots of fruits and vegetables and hoo-ha, then there's no pressure to quote civilize. So like the tribes, the tribes in California, especially in Northern California, where there's just lush growth, had a lot of leisure time and a lot of hunter-gatherer time sitting around, and they never, the Modocs and the whoever were, and this is a slanted word that I don't mean, but they were primitive. They were simple. They had a simpler life.
Yeah.
Whereas the tribes in southern Arizona that had to struggle for every bit of water that they had to learn how to build great irrigation systems.
I'm going to change chairs.
Yeah, I thought you might want to change chairs. It's really not a chair. It's a footstool.
No, hold on. Let's see. This is, I can already tell, much better.
It's got to be better.
Okay.
So places like central Mexico and southern Arizona, where they built great irrigation systems and pyramids and big towns, may have been because it was a little harder to make life go in those days. So you had to organize in order to build the systems to get you the water to get you your crops. So that's just another theory.
When I first met you at the coffee shop, we were talking about Neanderthals, and I was kind of lost in this reverie that just thinking that Neanderthals, it's coming to light, something that you think is so obvious. Turns out it's true, but I don't think it's obvious, but that they were just like us. Or they weren't obvious, they weren't just like us because they were Neanderthals, but they had thoughts, feelings, stories, history, culture. They thought they were the top dog. They thought that the world centered around them, and they speculated on stars and who these weirdos over there, with smaller shoulders and pointier heads were, and it's kind of this weird bias because I think it's part of a general thing that people do. They think the world revolves around them. And one of the lessons of anthropology that can be brought to, you all say, why do we study history? Why do we study literature? And someone that goes off and on, talking about the value of these things. But one of the real lessons of anthropology is letting you know that the world does not revolve around you.
Exactly.
And that someone who thought he was just as special as you, but lived 20,000 years ago, far off, existed. And if you met him, he might even have a better memory because he didn't rely on reading and writing all the time. He'd probably be much more adept at, at making a trap or killing an animal or cooking it up. Might make something very tasty. Do you agree with all that?
I do because I believe that there's this gene somehow in us that isn't what I call the us and them gene. And it seems like every group of people you talk to, there's an us and them, whether it's blacks and whites, or Indians and Pakistanis, or Irish and Scottish, or we seem to have this human thing where we want to, as you say, set ourselves aside and say, we are the people, we are the center of the universe, and all you dogs out there are not worth the light of day, which totally offends me, but I think that's part of our human nature. And so for us as modern 21st century people to say all those people that lived for thousands of years before us weren't as smart as we are, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
But on the other hand, we do see that there are differences in the way people live. And so you and myself would probably attribute it to culture, right?
Culture.
Okay, well then I would say, is culture a good thing? It's not your friend if it's making enemies.
But it also makes friends.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're born friends. I mean, this is essentially what we're saying. We're born similar, and we grow to imagine differences.
Or we're taught, or our culture teaches us that there are differences.
And that in itself is not bad at all. Vive la différence, as they say. But I would, I don't even know if they would actually say that. I don't speak French. But
they say that.
Yeah, the difference is not the issue or the problem. It's that we're taught to think that the differences are significant. That, to me, is the bump in the road.
Or that the differences are significant, and we're the winners, and you guys are the losers. That we're better than you are.
Yeah. Okay, but Neanderthals you've probably looked into this more than I have. Neanderthals had some fundamental differences.
Well, the definition of a different species is when you can't. When the offspring is sterile, and I don't think that's necessarily true with.
No, you don't think that's true?
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I don't know, but
I don't know either. But I thought it was true. I mean, we
don't have any proof. We don't have any proof either way.
Okay, let's forget about 10,000 years ago and take us up to now. So you came to Marfa, Texas when?
In November 2003.
Why? Why on earth did you do this? Do you love minimalist art?
My son was here. Oh,
who I didn't know he was your son until like a week ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he moved here
a well-kept secret, ma'am.
Well, the secret of being a mother to a young man is to keep your mouth shut as much as possible.
I see.
He moved here after he graduated college. He moved here in October 2000. And I was living in Tucson and then San Francisco, and kept visiting him. And loved it. It's great. And then by the summer of 2003, my job was coming to an end in San Francisco, and my older brother, by 2 years, dropped dead of a heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
And so I said to myself, Self, it's time to do what you want. So rather than hang around and try to find another job in San Francisco, I just packed up and moved out here that fall.
Okay, so you've been here since 2003, which in practically any other place in the U.S. wouldn't require a lot of discussion because most places haven't changed as much as this one. There's a bar, Padres, down the road. There's another one that just opened up 2 days ago. Do you know about that?
Over where the Adobe Moon was? Yeah. Is that a bar? It's hard to tell from their advertising what it is.
It's so cool what it is. It's so undefined.
Who's doing that?
John Johnson.
Oh, okay.
It looks. I told John. I said. The thing I love about this place is when you go into a new restaurant, bar, whatever, like a really big compliment is people say, this is so different. It's like a different city or a different country. But his place is like a different planet. It's just so...
I'll have to check it out.
But anyway, there's coffee shop, there's laundromat, there's, all kinds of different restaurants coming and going. And... is this what you had intended or thought you were moving into in 2003? It's also noisy, by the way. There's a lot of truck traffic. I don't know if that's always been here.
That I don't know about. Well, let's just lay it out. When I first visited Christmas 2000, my daughter and I stayed at the Paisano. It was before it was redone. It was still the Rock Hudson suite that we stayed in was early 80s, late 70s decorated, spooky,
Yeah.
creepy. There was nobody in the hotel. I mean, you came and went. There were no keys. Everything was unlocked.
Wow, very shiny, huh?
Yeah, very, very, very. It was Christmas time. It was cold. There was nobody in town.
Was in 2000?
$70 maybe, $75.
Wow.
And it was the suite. I mean, it was the big fancy one that overlooks the patio. Dan was working at Carmen's then. Carmen's was like the only restaurant. This is before Maya's.
Okay.
This is before the Paisano gets redone. It really did feel sort of like Planet Marfa, like out in the middle of the boonies. Where he lives, his next door neighbor house was a adobe ruin. I mean, David Landman since bought it and fixed it up, but at the time, it was slowly melting adobe into the ground. What else do I remember about that? You couldn't use your cell phone at all. You had to go down to the blinking red light and use the payphone there at the gas station. Your cell phone wouldn't work at all.
Is it that phone, payphone?
You know, I haven't looked.
I'll check.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, on the northwest corner. So yeah, we had like a Christmas dinner at Carmen's with Carmen's family. That was it. There was not much else to do. But then fast forward between 2000 and 2003.
Well, hold on. Before we fast forward, obviously you liked that.
I loved it.
Yeah, because you moved here.
I loved it.
Okay.
Because it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's the light. It's the Marfa Plain. I love. I grew up in southern Arizona, so I love open areas with mountains on the horizon. Mm-hmm. You know, you get me up in the mountains, I get a little claustrophobic, but just this open plain and the way the light hit and the peace and then the other thing, which is still true but it's changed. The other thing is because there was nothing to do, everybody. And when I say partied, I don't mean party, hardy, drunk, drugs, blah, blah, blah. I mean, everybody sat around and chatted and had get-togethers all the time. So I would fly out from Tucson or San Francisco and see more people and visit more people in a weekend than I did in San Francisco.
Right. Well, I feel that way right now. I live in Los Angeles when I'm not here, and I think you meet more people a day, even more new people a day, because this place is so unusual that it gets more tourists than it does locals in a way. Anyway, there's a certain weird density of friendships that exceeds New York or Los Angeles. Even
absolutely, because you see everybody all day.
Okay, so let's you go forward and you get the coffee place. And
so between 2000 and 2003, Maya's opens.
Oh, okay.
The
Paisano Mona Garcia had a restaurant apparently called the Tumbleweed, where Dollar General is. It was like a steakhouse.
That's before my time. You were the new Dollar General is?
Yeah, it ended before Maya's open.
Yeah, okay. I never was there. Never knew that it was open. They sold the Paisano on the courthouse steps for I think something like $150,000.
No.
Oh, you don't know this story? You don't know this story?
Yeah, go tell
It had been a hotel. It had gone into condos in the 70s or 80s. They had sold condos in it, and all that had gone broke. So as I say, when I stayed there in 2000, it was this weird place, and I believe it was 2001 where they had to sell it for back taxes. So the story is that Joe and Lana Duncan, who owned the Olympia in Fort Davis, came down to see who was going to buy the Paisano. And when they realized it was going to sell for $150,000.
Oh my gosh, $150,000. What year was that?
I think it's 2001.
Okay.
It's right in there somewhere. The story is they looked at each other and said, "Oh,
okay, right.
I guess we're buying a hotel." So they came down and revamped it, and that was a big change to have an actual place to stay, other than the old Capri,
right? Which
was Cracker Box, the definition of Cracker Box. I stayed there several times. What else happened between then? So things had already begun to sort of shift, and then the big shift has been the ballroom. When the ballroom
is a big.
Yeah, it's calmed down now.
Okay.
But in the early 2000s, there was the Chonati weekend every weekend, and that actually got big.
I barely noticed the ballroom, and that's why I'm like.
I understand.
Yeah, okay,
I understand. But other than Chonati weekend, which in the early 2000s kept getting bigger because they kept adding bands, and until it finally just got so huge it was out of hand, and they've condensed it down again. But in 2004, it would have been a big, I think that was Yo La Tengo. It was a big Chinati weekend, and the ballroom had a similar, if not larger, opening weekend. Mm-hmm. And all these people came out from Austin. There were like 2,000 people in town. Mm-hmm. Everybody, it was a charming, wonderful weekend. There were bands, there was this, there was that. And there was kind of a frenzy. This is when things were dirt cheap. Mm-hmm. And so all these people from Austin, Houston, Dallas came out and went, oh, I love Marfa. Oh, I'll buy this house for $10,000. Oh, I'll buy this. Right. And what happened was there was one house in town that is a woman who needed to sell it to make some money for her retirement. And so Dan spent like $30,000 on his house in 2000 or 2001.
Where's his house?
His house is on East Lincoln Street.
Okay.
Elizabeth's house, I don't know what she paid for it, but she probably paid.
Elizabeth
McBride. She had this house. I don't know what she paid for it, but I would be surprised if it was over $50,000.
Wow.
Let's just say. Because I'm not exactly sure when she came to town. But anyway, she needed to retire. She needed to get some money. So she puts this house on the market right about this time of the ballroom opening. She puts her house on the market for $150,000. Mm-hmm. And had a lovely flyer made. And all of us were standing around going, that is the most ridiculous thing I have ever seen. That house is worth at max $75,000. Mm-hmm. And then it turned out that a wealthy person who knew Marfa and knew Elizabeth and knew she needed money bought it like in 3 days. So then and then couple that with the ballroom. The story was that 11 houses sold ballroom opening weekend.
Oh my God! This is what year?
I think it's 2004.
Okay.
So that then everybody then after that looked around and said, oh well, shoot, and that's when the prices skyrocketed. I mean, they went from nothing to what they are now. They haven't really changed that much in the last 4 or 5 years. But that one 2004, 2005 period, they just went up the ceiling. And that's one of the big changes.
When did you buy yours? 2003?
I don't own a house. I rent this house.
Oh, you rent this house? Mm-hmm. Well, this is a great house you're renting.
It's a great house. It's a great house. I should have bought a house before.
Well, I've been saying that for like the last 20... I live in Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles in 1994 after
what part?
riots, right around the Grove, around Beverly Hills and Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
After riots, earthquakes, fires, and mudslides. And that was the lowest it's been in the last half century. Mm-hmm. And so part of me, my morning ritual in Los Angeles is like getting coffee and regretting that I didn't buy a place in 1994. So whatever.
There was a house around the corner from Dan's house that when he first moved here, it was on the market for $18,000. Yeah. I thought, well, I could have put it on my credit card.
Well,
anyway, but that's the big change is that shift. Bless you. And when Dan was living here in the early 2000s, he said that people would sit around and go, oh, it's going to be the next Santa Fe, and so there were murmurings. But that shift in 2004, 2005, when it was the biggest Chinati weekend ever, and the ballroom. Oh, and they had a big weekend for the 50th anniversary of Giant, so that would have been 2004. Well, that was kind of when Marfa opened up.
Okay, and then Padres, all these places where people congregate mean that people now don't do these, as you say, these house parties so much.
Or go to Ray's. We used to go to Ray's before Padres.
So really 2004 was the big
It was a big shift. Okay. It was a big shift. And then it's been gradual since then. And then I would say I think Padres is another big shift because before Padres, especially for the visitors, see, there wasn't a place for visitors to go. Before Padres, the visitors could go to Maya's or the Paisano and have a drink, and then the locals would head over to Ray's. And the people from Austin would say, that's such a dive, I'm not going to go there. I'm like, no, you're not, because we like it. And that was, it tended to be more locals. And then Padres is where it's the tourists and the locals more mix.
You don't seem to care too much. I'm just picking up that vibe. I mean, you don't seem to think like the whole town's gone to like when I first came here. I used to love talking to Tyge Lancaster about. I still love talking to Tyge, but it's like, Tyge, what do you think Potter's? Well, if you want the whole town to come Austin, Texas, 6th Street, it's a great idea, but that's not why I moved here. You know, you could just imagine. I don't get that impression from you at all.
Oh no, no. Thanks. One of my other deep motivations is that I don't want to become a grumpy old lady. I read once years ago about a 95-year-old guy. He was on the board of some museum, and they said he was such an interesting man because at 95 years old, he still believed that the future was at least as interesting as the past.
Oh, well
so I try to live like that. I mean, I look around, things have changed. I said this the other day. One of the things that's changed just in the last year is that there's more, and I'm going to call them young hipsters just to classify them as, being under 40. But there's a bigger group of those, so that sometimes when you go to an opening, they don't mingle. There's enough of them that they talk to each other, and there's less mingling with us old ladies in town than there used to be, because you used to go to an opening and talk to everybody there.
Right. And
from the Tyges to the
this
Den.
town still is remarkable in that regard.
As I say, it's shifted a little.
Right.
But I also had the opportunity to live in Fort Davis for 2 years, and there's none of that goes on there.
Yeah.
And there's none of that goes on in
Alpine?
Well, I don't know about that.
I don't know about
Alpine's a whole other culture. Yeah. But there's no young people in Fort Davis, and so I know, as I say, I notice that there's more of them. I notice that I know fewer of them, and I need to, I walk around going, "Hello, I don't know you. Yeah. You have to talk to me." But that's a small shift.
It is a small shift. I mean, it's a shift that I think I've kind of seen through, because the reason I do these interviews is because they're with friends, and yet I would say half of them have been with people over 70. That would not happen in Los Angeles. You just wouldn't be in the same place at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's precious, I think, for both sides
of
the coin.
I agree. Though, I would have to say 70 is not what 70 used to be, for all types of reasons. I think culture has slowed down. I mean, in the 60s, I'll tell you what I mean. In the 60s, every year for 5 years was significantly different than the previous year. If you dressed in 1967 like they did in 1965, you would stand out. And 1967 was Summer of Love. 1968 were called the Days of Rage. Like within 1 year, people went from flowers to watching political.
68 was the worst year ever.
And so my point is that there were radical shifts. I mean, cataclysmic shifts within 12 months in the 60s. And since that time, it's gradually slowed down until today is not. I mean, there's a lot of technological change, but as far as the way people dress, what they dance to, it's not that different than it was 10 years ago. Probably not even different than it was 20 years ago. I mean, when I was a kid in the 70s, 40 was, I wouldn't even say a barrier. It was just like the definition of a different mentality, and that is not the case now.
Well, there's some. I know a little bit about this. There's some sociology theory called about cohort groups.
Don't know
That
it.
the people that you go to high school with. You go to high school, you learn how to do your hair, you learn how to do your makeup, and you do that for the rest of your life. And so I think what's happened, and this is my opinion, but it's like that cohort group has spread a bit. Like the example I always use is that when I was in high school, I graduated in '68, that horrible year. If the Scottsdale High School marching band had been marching to music that was 30 years old, they would have been marching to big band music.
Yeah, sure.
And there's no way that our cohort would have paid any attention to big band music. Right. Those were our parents' music. That was tacky. But when my kids were in high school in the 90s, you're sitting there in the football stand and they're playing Three Dog Night, and you're going like, wait a minute, this is the same song.
Yeah, and they still.
So I think there's a blending of the, And I think that's what you're saying too. I think is not such a big shift between
the culture has
parents
slowed
and
down.
children.
The cultural change has slowed down. One advantage we have now over the 60s or even the punk rock 70s is in the 60s, people simply did not know about music from the 40s or 30s because they were so busy with all the stuff that was going on. In the 70s, I think people may have known about older stuff, but they rejected it because they were too busy being cool. But now, if you were a lady and you're dressing in styles of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s, that's unusual, but the angle is still there. We understand where you're coming from.
Right.
You know, it's not a forbidden time. It's it's just like, gosh, she's dressing like there was racism on the street, and which is the truth of everything had a political significance in 1969. The way you dressed meant something, and your hair length meant something, and now it doesn't. It really doesn't. Which is
true.
Yeah. Let's see, we got 5 minutes left. Because the only reason I keep them this short is it's just because the editing is a real nightmare. It's easier to edit.
Sure.
And also, the reason I tell people these are conversations is because I talk a lot, and that's what I want to avoid in KRTS. If I do the KRTS in the studio, then I have to do an interview.
That's a whole different thing.
And it's a different thing, and I don't get to tell people
you
what I
don't get
think.
to talk.
Right. Anyway, tell me this: who was that wacko that Dan was playing violin with on Padre?
Oh, that happened. That was the band that was supposed to come was Chris Cesak's band. Chris Cesak used to live here. He and Dan are best friends.
Okay.
Dan is godfather to his children. Chris got sick, couldn't come. I'm trying to remember. I think this guy was like one of the members of the band, or he was a friend of the members of the band, or something. And he said
that picked up hitchhiking?
something. And so when Chris and Jean's band couldn't come, they said, "Oh well, this guy will come." And then somebody said to somebody who said to somebody, "Well, is there a fiddler in town?" And Dan said, "Oh sure, if you're a friend of Chris Cesak, I'll go fiddle with you." And then that guy turns out to be what a whack.
Yeah, he was a whack. So I see you at Maya's a lot.
Yeah.
Is that your haunt?
I used to work there.
No way.
Yeah, that was my first job here. Was bartending at Maria's.
Wild.
It was great. It was one of my favorite jobs ever in my life.
You know, I have a similar. I don't know if it's similar at all, but I have a situation that it'll help you understand me. If you just saw me in Padres, I seldom hang out at Padres. In fact, I don't go there to hang out because I know once I'm in there, I'm going to be doing dishes or making a hamburger or moving a chair or something like that.
Right. Work.
Yeah, right. And I had spent the last 10 years in Los Angeles working alone, doing kind of computerish stuff. And I loved coming out here and working like where you have to like meet people and kind of make them happy. I don't like talking to people necessarily, but I don't mind customer service, and I don't mind like putting on an apron and running around manically. And so I've gotten a lot out of being here in Marfa, Texas. But one of the things I've gotten out of it is just, kind of a reintegration to that kind of work.
I love it. It's my favorite kind of work.
If we had talked like last week, I would have said I would have tossed it up between Marfa Table and Maya's for my places to hang out. Marfa Table because it's so quiet, like people just leave you alone, you don't talk. And Maya's for just the opposite reason.
Yes.
However, Planet Marfa is really cool, and that's where I've been the last 2 days.
Okay.
So I really recommend it.
I'll check it out. No, Maya's was fun because behind the bar I got to meet everybody that came to town. For the
that's how I feel
year and a half
about
work there. Yeah, and that was great fun. So I feel comfortable there. I like to go. I like every other place too. But when I don't know where else to go, I'll go sit at the bar and at Maya's.
Oh, when are you coming back to town?
Probably Thanksgiving.
Wow. Well, let's just do a few minutes more then.
Okay.
Talking about Neanderthal people and so forth. So is this where you live? I guess not.
What do you mean?
Well, you're going to San Francisco.
But I'm leaving everything. I'm going to be commuting to San Francisco.
Are you going to teach people in San Francisco?
No, I'm going back to my former job, which is environmental consulting.
Were you a hippie of some?
Never.
No.
Never.
But
Never.
you seem like
I was always the good girl.
But you seem very heavy into like the hippie value system. Are you vegetarian?
No.
Oh, good.
No, I mean, I don't eat as much meat as I used to, but that's more from dietary interest, not from vegetarian stuff.
Do you wear cowboy boots?
Yep.
Okay.
Do I wear high heels? Yes.
You do? Okay. Good.
Yes. I've always been pretty eclectic.
Right. That helps you live longer.
Yeah.
Actually, more than eclectic, being eccentric helps you live longer. And
I'm working on that one. I'm working on that.
Actually, one thing in Taigi's favor as far as longevity is being eccentric. Like going around town in a little golf cart. With the weirder you can get, that means the more immune you are to lots of cultural sicknesses. Like our versions of heartbreak, because we're so romantically.
Could be.
Yeah. Anyway. I don't even know where I was going with that.
If I could say, you said end it up, but if I could say one thing I think that's important is that for the new Marfans, in quote, not to ignore old Marfa. There's incredible culture here.
What is old Marfa?
The Hispanic traditions, the ranching traditions, camp meeting, old families.
What is camp meeting? I don't even know.
See, you don't even know what camp meeting is. That's your assignment. Find out what camp meeting is. Camp meeting is an old-fashioned religious revival that started in 1890 that is still going strong. It's like I don't know how many are around the United States that are left, but there can't be many. And it's a combination religious retreat week. And family reunion, and all the old ranching families get together, and it's this whole bit of history out here that if you're focused on getting another beer at Padres, you miss out on.
But it sounds like I'm not invited.
You have to. Well, you can go. It's open.
When is it?
It's open. It's the first week in August.
Okay.
And it's out. When you go to Fort Davis and you just take a left past the tomato farms?
Yeah.
Is that 17? It's out 17.
Okay.
Blois camp meeting.
One final question for you.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely leave that in. Not that anyone will ever listen to this, but they might when I get a whole library of them.
Yeah.
Are there any traditions from 10,000 years ago that have stuck with us? Anyway, do we have any? I mean, you're talking about paying attention to old Marfans, so I'm really going back.
Okay, how about this? Yesterday morning, we got up at dark 30 and went out to Chinati to watch the sunrise.
Oh, good!
On the aluminum boxes. And I bet you 10,000 years ago they were doing something
That's
with
cool.
The sunrise.
Okay, well, let's leave on that. And
okay.
Thank you very much.